Hi, how are you?
Hi, great. Welcome to Winging It, a show about web design development and our approach to solving problems. But today we have a very special episode. Today is Winging It Live. And I brought my favorite web person in the whole world, and that is Miriam, to talk about container queries. So thanks for
Great.
joining me today. I
Yeah,
thought this was
I'm
a
excited.
super awesome. I thought this was a super important discussion to have because back in February, I was working on a project and I don't remember why I thought I needed it, but I thought, well, this would be a great use case for a container query. So I threw it into my layout, and all of a sudden, unexpected things started happening. So I thought I'm going to take some screenshots and take a video of this, and it could be useful one day when I wanted to dive deeper into it. And today is that day. And that's why I know that was back in February, on February 8th, exactly. Um, so, because we wanted to start this about the gotchas of container queries, we can certainly go into the demo, but Miriam, before we do that, do you want to just give a brief introduction of what container queries are at a high level and why you would use them?
Yeah, so if you haven't run into container queries, likely you've used media queries. Let me just share my screen here. And let's see, we'll share that whole window. Um, we sharing that code pen here.
I have to add it to stage. There we go.
Great. Um, let's see, I can zoom in on this code a little bit. But if you've used media queries, so we can change the layout of something at different sizes of the viewport. But what you'll notice here is we have one in the sidebar and one in the main area, and the sidebar sort of stays small. And so going to different layouts. Oh, actually, that's already a container query. Whoops. Sorry about that. So here we can see media. I suppose I already had container queries in this demo, which was not what I intended. Um, the point of it here is that with a container query, with a media query, we're measuring the whole window. And so if both cards had a media query, they would change based on the window size, and that wouldn't work if they are, say, in a sidebar that stays small even when the window gets big. But with a container query, we can change that so that one stays small while the other gets large, which is what we want if that refreshes there. There we go. So one is going to its horizontal version while the other is staying at its vertical version. Even though they're in the same viewport, we're not measuring the viewport, we're measuring a container. And in this case, we've set the container to be the main or the aside. So it's measuring those boxes instead of measuring the whole viewport. That's the point of a container query. But it does come with some little surprises, and I think that's what you ran into.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about this demo you put together, what you ran into here?
Yeah, so I have a form here that has the form fields that we're filtering by on the left-hand side, and then all of the items, the results on the right-hand side. Uh, Again, I don't remember what I was trying to do, but I wanted to put the form fields on the left into a container. I was probably trying to control the layout or the size of the buttons at when they were a certain size to like maybe have them wrap whatever. But then when I added containment to, right now it's on the field set, I think, or it would be on the field set if it were commented. Everything just collapsed.
Yeah, okay. So you want to
So line
uncomment
3,
that,
I had,
and it
and
collapses.
imagine my surprise.
And if we inspect that field set, so the field set is now a container. It's not letting me scroll over there to see that. But this field set is a container, and it's even collapsing more than the content there, just because we've added container type of inline size. And this is a real common surprise, and comes from some interactions of how CSS layout works. And yeah, we can see it here. So if we turn off the container size, it takes its width from the contents. And if we turn on inline size containment, it no longer does. That field set just collapses. And part of it is that we're here in a grid. And that first column is auto. If we set that first column to, I don't know, 20 characters, we're back at it.
It was a really
This
good
is
guess. On the
I
width.
this is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic sizing, and part of what containment does is turn off intrinsic sizing. So I made actually a more reduced test case. This is a beautiful demo. Mine's going to be a bit uglier, but let us see just the details of what's happening. How did I end up in the wrong place? There we go. All right, so here we have a potential container and some content inside of it, just a paragraph inside of the main element. And then there's a body around that. And I just want to play with a few things that show us this difference and what containment is doing. So to start with, the main area and the paragraph, they're both block elements. So they stretch and they fill the space horizontally. Block elements fill the space on the inline axis, and they take their block axis from the content. Inline elements take their inline axis from the content and don't do any stretching. Okay, so we can do various things here that will change that. We can set a let's say
Zoom
inline
the
size.
size on the code a little bit, please.
Yes.
That's way better. Thanks.
Great. So we can say the inline size is 20 ems, right? And now we've given it a specific inline size from the CSS. So this is providing an extrinsic size. We can do the same thing on the block size. Set an extrinsic size. Now, actually, we already have an extrinsic size on the main element on that container because it's coming from the body and that's outside. So extrinsic just means it's coming from outside somewhere. So outside can mean we provided it explicitly, but outside can also mean it comes from the body. And if we say the body has an inline size of 20 ems, 2 ems, whatever we want to say, that's also changing the size of that main container. Now this becomes important if we do something like remove that contents. Let's remove, let's say, position absolute. And that just removes the contents from the flow, and we can see that the box collapses because it's no longer sizing to its contents because its contents have been removed from the flow. And what's actually happening in your demo is the same thing. We don't need this. But if we say that the container, we contain, now when we apply container type, which is what you did, container type inline size, nothing happens there. And that's because we're still getting a size from the body on that axis. If we change this to just size, all of the sizes, it collapses. And what it's doing is it's ignoring the contents. It's refusing to take its dimensions from the intrinsic size of the contents, and it's instead looking to the extrinsic sizes. So we could get that back by saying that this is a grid and its min block size is 100%. And now it stretches again because stretching is what happens by default in grids. And then we can break that again by saying, okay, let's place the content in the center. This is a thing with CSS where there's all these interactions between different things, right? So setting container type to size doesn't necessarily make the box collapse, but it makes the box ignore its contents. And then if our layout is depending on the size of that contents, then the thing collapses. Does that make sense? This like...
It does. It's just another like layer of things that people will need to like think about when they're starting to implement this. Probably more
Right.
so into an existing project, but also they'll have it in the back of their mind if they're starting something new.
Right. If we're not doing something like this, we don't even need that there. And we say container type inline size. Whoops. Most of the time, we're not going to have any problems. So that's what can make this extra surprising, is it doesn't always happen because things usually stretch in the dimension that we're doing, that we're messing with. So then it's just when we add something that says stop stretching. The other way to stop stretching would be to say float left. That should stop it from stretching. Oh, it doesn't. I wonder...
Does the content
wonder why. Well, it shouldn't wrap to content while floated. Oh, it's because I'm in a grid. I can't be floated in a grid. So yeah, so floating can make it collapse. Grid and then grid placement. Like if we justify items start, should do a similar thing to that float left. So when we're relying on the content to have a size and they don't have a size, that's when we run into the problem. And that's what's happening in your demo as well. I think this is one of the most common issues that people run into with container queries. And it just means we need to find some other way to provide that sizing, usually from the layout. So usually it would be that we want to say grid template columns and give it like a min-max maybe of, well, we can't say min content here because we're ignoring the content. Min content is an intrinsic size and we need something extrinsic. So we can say 20 characters and a max of 80% or something. And then we get that, and we're not paying attention to the size of the contents. We're not using the size of the contents. That's where it would fail. Min content. Now there's another fix to this too. So min content is not going to quite work because it can't see the content, but we can give things a min intrinsic size. Intrinsic extrinsically setting intrinsic sizes is a weird concept, but we can do it now. So it's contain intrinsic. Am I spelling that right? Contain intrinsic size.
I don't know. I've never seen this before. I feel like you're making up properties as we go.
I am totally making this up. Let's do a thing where it collapses. So we say justify content center, for example. It's going to collapse. We don't need that float left anymore. Contain intrinsic size 30 ems. And this says, treat this as though it has an intrinsic size of 30 ems. And my headphones just died.
Yeah, you're fine. You sound fine, but
great.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just through my computer speakers. Yeah, so contain intrinsic size is a way that we can give something an intrinsic size when it otherwise wouldn't have it. This is also useful if we're using contain in other ways. So when we set container type, one of the things that we're doing is just saying contain inline size. That happens automatically behind the scenes. It's the same sort of thing. There are other reasons that we might want to contain size. You can see that collapsed entirely. But then we can, on both axes, say, I guess 100% is not going to work there, but we can set an intrinsic size on both axes. Right now it's setting both, but we can set them separately as well if we want to. So there's, this is not something that we often want to do, but it is useful sometimes. It's especially useful if we're containing something when it's off screen so that we're speeding up layout. There's sort of performance ways of using contain if we've got a lot of stuff on the page. And then we can give everything the same default size so our scroller's not jumping around when we get to it and actually show it. So there's various ways out of this problem. We can put a size on the thing. We can put a size on whatever is outside on the grid that's sizing it. We can give it a new intrinsic size, a fake one that we provided. But yeah, the reason this happens is it would be a loop if we could change the contents using a container query, and then those contents would change the size of the container, and then that changes the container query result, and we get this endless loop. So to avoid that, we turn off content sizing entirely and require extrinsic size, an extrinsic size from anywhere outside of the contents, anywhere outside. Yeah. Okay.
So that's great. I'll have to watch all those autos that I use all the time. It seems like the easiest thing would be to add that min-max to the grid template. I mean, at least as far as most of the things I would probably reach for, because then you're setting that up at a higher level. And anything else that you're editing in that grid area would also inherit that size. So I think it would work. It would be the easiest to do it there in this case, I guess. I don't know about every case. I'm sure there's some other use cases.
Yeah, here it's probably providing it from the grid column. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, grid column. It was auto sized, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to change a lot there. Now there's some other gotchas when it comes to container queries, or even just like some other general recommendations. I know you have a blog post about contain root. Is that something that we should talk about in the scheme of this issue?
Sure. Do you have a link to that?
I do. This one.
And also play with it here. So, I mean, there's some other interesting things. Like if we said, position fixed on the paragraph, and then we're fixing it to the top left. That would normally fix it to the viewport, which is what we're seeing there. The paragraph is going to the top left of the viewport. But if we added containment on the container, well, we need, I think, layout containment for this. We're just going to do a container type, which adds both container type inline size. And it doesn't only collapse, it also contains the layout. So it creates a new layout context, a new positioning context, including for fixed position. So position relative is a way of capturing absolutely positioned things, but containment is also going to capture fixed position things. So that's another thing that can be a little surprising. If we want things that are really fixed position, we might have to move them out. If we move them out of the container, that's one way to solve the problem. Now, it's not inside the container. It can see the viewport again. But there's a few other things like that that make it really dangerous to put containment on the root. When we put containment on the root, we can lose scrolling. We can fixed positioning can behave weirdly. Let's say our block size is 300%. Something that's fixed position, which normally would stay at the top of the screen, is scrolling off because it's now fixed to the body element rather than being fixed to the viewport. So this is dangerous also using it on either body or on root. Either way is a little bit risky and has the same sort of problems and implications. So at OddBird, we generally avoid creating containers on the root, and instead we'll say something like main, header, nav, and footer all become containers. So we have some sort of top level containers, but they're not on the root specifically. And if we have that link, we should share that.
This one? Oh.
Yeah, that contain root article. It goes into more detail on why this happens, what all the potential issues are, and there's some workarounds. Like if you really need containment on the root or the body, there's some workarounds you can use to roughly make it work. They come with a few trade-offs, but it works. Yeah, another one that comes up a lot is that thing, you can't style the thing that you are querying. So
I used to hit that one all the time.
Yeah, this is an easy one to run into. If we set this container up as a container, container type inline size, we don't need that position fixed anymore. But if we created a container query here, let's do it outside. And then we said, I guess we'll want to measure something. Let's do inline size greater than 15 ems. And when we run into that, we want the container to have a background of maroon, just so we can see it. Now, if we put you'll see that it didn't change, and it's not going to change even if we get an inline size that's greater than 15 ems. This is just not going to apply because the container is looking for anything above it. It's looking for its containers. So the container can't see itself as a container. it only sees containers outside of it. So we could put containment on the body for this example. Container type, inline size. And now our nested container can see the container outside of it, and it can make that conditional change. So in some contexts, this is going to mean, especially in, say, a grid where we want to measure the size of something in the grid. Let's say grid template columns, repeat. Let's put this on the what am I doing here? Let's have various divs and a main around them. What's our grid? And say, all right, the main grid is display grid, has repeating autofit. Those will fit as there's space. I'm gonna make that a little smaller so they jump in. Now we'd really like those containers to measure themselves so that we can do something different based on the container. Say we want to change the font size to something smaller, or to something, I don't know. I guess it can get bigger when it's big enough. We're not going to be able to see that. So we'll just stick with something like this. They're not getting over 15 ems, are they?
Is that because the container type has to move up? Does it need to be on main instead of container?
Oh, right. We're not going to see it. Yeah, nothing's going to happen there. You're right.
I passed the test.
You passed the test. Now, if we do it on the paragraph, because the paragraph is inside of the container, now we can see it.
So the rule everyone needs to remember is you can't query yourself. You only can set up the container and style the things in it.
Exactly, right. So in these grid situations, it's sometimes useful to add an extra wrapping div or something that we want to be the thing that we can style. If we need to be able to style the box, we might need an extra div inside of there to measure its container, which is a little ugly, but it works when we can do it. Yeah, I think that covers sort of the main gotchas that people run into a lot of the time.
We have some questions for a
Oh, great.
question. Stephanie Eccles, friend of the show, hi, is interested if you have an opt-out strategy to remove containment.
An opt-out strategy to remove containment. So if I've got something, say, on container, and I want to sometimes turn that off, is that what we're trying to do?
Sure.
Um,
I'll say yes, because I don't know what the full intent of the question is.
So we could say container first child. So just in some cases, we want to opt out. Now, generally, I would say better than opting out is when we can avoid styling it in the first place. So we could say not first child for applying our container. But if we can't do that and we want to override it, when we're doing overrides, this is a little tangential to container queries specifically, but when we're overriding things is a great time to use shorthands Shorthands tend to override a whole idea. So I would use container none. Let's see if that for the first child. Oh, I have to spell it right though. Right. So first child container none. That's clearing out its container type and its container name. If we only wanted to clear out the container type, we could do that. Container type, except I guess container type doesn't accept none.
Unset? So it would be revert or unset?
Yeah, that should work. Revert or unset. Unset is always a good option when what we're trying to do is unset something. But yeah, if we're trying to remove the whole thing, I would generally remove everything at once. And shorthands are good at that.
Yeah, that's like a super good pro tip for anything you're doing, not just container query. Like
Yeah,
thinking
if
about
if
how to
things
use a
like
shorthand
borders
for
or backgrounds, remove all
Yeah.
of the different things related to a border and background at once. Use the shorthands. Shorthands are for starting over, is how I think of it. Longhands are for making little tweaks, and shorthands are for starting over.
Great little tip to think about. I have another question here from Sue Austin. Is it possible to overuse containers and degrade performance?
There's no danger in general. There's no general case where it's dangerous to overuse containers. There may be edge cases where you would find certain types of containers or certain container uses if they happen too often, maybe. I mean, basically the browser engineers that I've asked this question to were like, it should just work. It should be fine. Use them as much as you want. And but we can't promise that you can't find an edge case. So as with anything in CSS, you might be able to find a way to cause yourself problems with it. But in general, you shouldn't run into problems with it.
All right. Question from Stacy Kvernmo. Can you use container queries everywhere now?
Friend of the show, Stacy
Browser
Kvernmo.
wise. Friend of the show, Stacy. Asking for a friend.
Yeah, container size queries are shipping in all of the modern browsers for over a year. Wait, when did it land in Firefox? I think Firefox was last. It's been a while that all the browsers have supported container queries. I would have to check. Can I? Container query units.
Which we didn't even talk about yet.
Which we didn't talk
We're gonna
about.
have to do another one.
Container size queries go back the farthest. I think Firefox may have been the latest. Yeah, February of 2023. So
I thought it was fall.
That's been available for quite a while. Now, there are also style queries which are not quite available everywhere. They're in Safari Tech Preview now. And Firefox has signaled that they're working on it, but it's not available anywhere there yet. And all of the support is partial support because we defined style queries to work with all properties, but everybody is shipping it with only custom properties, only querying custom properties. But size queries, you can use size query units, you can use, those are all there. There was a question in Mastodon about query units, and we can see those here if we said font size
Red.
12 CQI, that would be container query inline. We can go to something more dramatic there. And we don't generally want to set font sizes to just a variable unit like this because that's not going to work when our elements get small. But this shows you what the container query units do. We can measure the inline dimension if we've set up an inline container. In order to measure the block dimension, we would have to set up a block container. So a size container that contains both axes. The problem with containing both axes is we end up collapsing on that axis now because we haven't given it some extrinsic size. So what am I going to do? Grid auto rows. 20 lines. That's probably too much. 10 lines. So giving it some extrinsic size there, they don't collapse anymore. And now we can measure the block axis, or we can measure the min or the max, similar to viewport units. But we're measuring the available space. So this was one of the questions. Container queries are always responding to the content box of the container. So it's not measuring from border to border. It's measuring from the inner padding to the inner padding. Container query units are doing the same thing. So there was a request there of like, can we measure other parts of the box? And I don't know. I think that's an interesting question we might want to take to the working group. But right now, yeah, we're measuring the point of container queries was to check what available space you have. So we went with the content box of the container because that's the available space in most cases. There is currently no way on a CQ unit to specify what container. So we could say here container and give it a name. This is a grid item and it's an inline size container. And then we can call them by name. So if I just said grid there, this is not going to apply. But if I said grid item, it will apply. We don't need our auto rows anymore if we're only doing inline size containment. So we can specify what container we want to look at with a query. Right now, we can't do that with container query units because they might be used outside of container. There's no good syntax, but we have added a syntax. It just doesn't work yet. I don't think anybody's shipped this, but that will be the syntax. We're getting functional units where you can pass in the name of the container that you want to look at for your units. That will be supported at some point. I don't know when browsers will ship that, but right now,
interesting.
We just get the nearest container.
True or false? You can give your containers more than one name.
True.
And why would you want to?
Yeah. Why would you want to? So you can give them as many names as you want. I think of these like classes. So we can say this is a grid item. This is also part of the layout. And then I can have container queries that want to respond only to layout containers or only to grid item containers. And so they're like classes in that way. We can be more or less specific about which types of containers we want to respond to and why.
So you can give another.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, so you can give another class the container name of layout and it works as a class.
If we did like a layout container name, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yes.
So the risk here, container name layout, and then container grid item inline size, and then we give this one layout. Now let's inspect that and see what happened. The container name layout, if we go to computed value on container name, it's only layout. We lost grid item because we've just overridden that value. which is probably not what we wanted. This is a problem throughout CSS when we're providing names for things. It's easy to just override. It's hard to add to. And there's not a good solution in CSS right now. We keep talking about it. We keep talking about some sort of additive cascade or additive CSS where you could grab a property and add to it. But that has a lot of different meanings in different situations. Like, are you adding another name or are you adding to a length? So it's a hard one and hasn't been solved yet.
Great. I know we talked about some of the gotchas for the first 3/4 of this video, but container queries are super cool, and I just want to make sure we also mention some of like the really cool things. And I know you gave us like an overview of what it is, but is there anything like super cool that you want to show or talk about?
Do you have that link to Ahmad Shadid's articles?
I do here, I think.
An interactive guide to CSS container queries. I mean, this is one of my favorite articles for laying out what all container queries can do and giving you the syntax. He covers these pitfalls. He covers query units and then has a number of use cases. And every article on container queries, including our articles, will have the card component and how to do that sort of layout that adjusts a card based on the container size. But then he goes into so many other different places that you might use this. And I think it's good to remember too that we might use them at the top level of a layout. We might use them to change sort of entire layout blocks, but we also might use them to change icons inside of a card. There's good reasons to use nested containers in various ways. And he has a lot of those use cases throughout this article. I highly recommend it. And it's all interactive, so you can play with how the things change
Cool.
at different sizes. Yeah.
This is fantastic. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, I think we can probably wrap this up. I should mention we do have an upcoming layout workshop if anyone here is interested in attending or sharing it with their friends. It's on our website, oddbird.net/workshops, and you will find it at cascading-layouts. Anything to say about that? You can sign up today. Tickets are available. It's June something,
June 24 to
24-ish?
26. It's 3 sessions, 3 2-hour sessions over 3 days. Yeah, and we're going to do a deep dive into layout, everything from normal flow to intrinsic and extrinsic sizing. We'll cover that in more detail. And then getting into flexbox alignment, grids, and container queries. We'll cover them in more detail.
Yeah. And Miriam will be teaching. I will only be attending, so no worries there. Yes, we will post all the links that we discussed today in the description. This will be available after we're ending the stream. And upcoming on Winging It, in an upcoming episode, we'll go over odd contrast, which is one of OddBird's color tools that we made for not only checking the contrast of your color, but you can also convert it to the different newer formats that are maybe less easy to guess. I mean, HSL, I love HSL because you can kind of guess what color you're going to get, but I have not figured out how to guess something like display P3. So it's a really fun tool, and we'll go over everything that went into that. What else? Like and subscribe if you want to support us. You can find our email at oddbird.net/oddnews.
Yeah, and we'll try to do some more live streams coming up too. Reach out if you have questions you'd like us to cover or things you're running into with CSS that we can dig into in a live stream. We'll let
take
you know when
screenshots
it's
like
coming.
I
I don't
did.
think we have a strict schedule yet.
Yes, yes. So yeah, let us know what you thought. If you want more from us, give us some topics. We're happy to go over that. And remember, best practice is the conversation. So let's keep talking. I don't have my fancy music for an outro, so I'm just going to wave.
Great.
Thanks, Miriam.
Good to see you.
You too.